Warning, this episode may contain disturbing content, soothing narration, and mild existential dread. Basically, murder ASMR for stressed professionals. Listener discretion is advised. Hell, it might be necessary.
This week on Crime to Burn, we're doing something a little different. We have an author interview coming out in a few days, and that'll be a bonus episode. But I also wanted to share a case with you, one that matters. This story isn't new, but it deserves to be heard again. It's the story of Judy Malinowski, a victim of domestic violence whose courage helped to change the law. This episode first aired in Season 2 of the podcast You Should Be Here. This season was called Or No and focused on cases of domestic violence. If you haven't heard of You Should Be Here, it's a collaborative project where podcasters donate episodes and the proceeds go to charities that support victims and their families. On October 25th, the newest season, Cases That Haunt Us, drops just in time for Halloween, and I've also contributed 2 episodes to that series. I wanted to bring Judy's story back now because October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Judy Malinowski was the first person in the United States to testify in her own murder trial. She gave her testimony and was cross-examined before she passed away from the injuries inflicted by her abuser. That testimony was sealed until after her death, when prosecutors were finally able to charge him with murder. Her legacy still lives on. A new law in Ohio bears her name, and Judy's foundation, which is named in her honor, continues to help other survivors of domestic violence rebuild their lives. If you'd like to learn more, the link is in the show notes. And while you're there, you'll also find links to the You Should Be Here podcast. Keep an eye out for our bonus episode this week, my interview with Arnie Bernstein, author of Bath Massacre, America's First School Bombing. And next week, we'll be bringing you a special Halloween episode that we've got in the works. But first, this is the story of Judy Malinowski. Welcome to Crime to Burn, where we explore the dark city landscape where true crime intersects with arson and criminal negligence. Join us as we sift through the ashes to bring you the story of what really happened. Welcome back to Crime to Burn. I'm April, a fire protection engineer and former firefighter. There's no adequate introduction that can tell you everything you need to know about Judy Malinowski. So let's start with the most amazing fact about Judy that you're going to hear today, and we'll work backwards. Judy Malinowski is the first woman in the United States to testify in court against her murderer. You heard that right. Judy testified in her own murder trial. In fact, Judy fought for years to be able to testify against her attacker because Judy was a fighter. She fought cancer, she fought addiction, and she fought to be believed, to be heard, and to be helped. Despite her fighting nature, Judy found herself in the clutches of an evil man, a man that systematically manipulated Judy and her family until he had Judy in his complete control. And when Judy decided to change that, when she decided to take back control, when she fought back against him, he did something so horrific that it's difficult to put the horror he instigated into words. Michael Slager, Judy's abuser, dumped gasoline over her entire body and then set her on fire. Judy Malinowski was a victim of domestic violence. Judy Malinowski ultimately died at the hands of her abuser. But before she left this world, she fought. She fought for days, and then for months, and finally for years. She fought through excruciating pain. She fought through 59 surgeries. She fought so that she could testify against Michael Slager, the man that brutally attacked her, permanently disfigured her, and subjected her to daily agony until she ultimately died as a result of complications from her burn injuries. But Michael Slager couldn't kill Judy's fight, because now, even after her death, her fighting spirit lives on. She has left a legacy of fight for other victims of domestic violence. Judy's family continues to fight for Judy and other victims like her after her death. They're fighting to enact harsher sentences for domestic abusers that intentionally maim or disfigure their victims through Judy's Law. Judy's Foundation assists families of victims of domestic violence, drug abuse, and human trafficking. And Judy's House is a safe place for single mothers like Judy to find refuge from domestic violence. Michael Slager killed Judy Malinowski, but he could not silence her. Even in death, Judy Malinowski has not been silenced because Judy Malinowski was a fighter. Judy Malinowski was born August 26, 1983 in Columbus, Ohio. She was a beauty pageant winner, a homecoming queen. She told her family when she was young that she aspired to have a simple life, a job as a school teacher, to get married, and become a mother. And Judy did marry, and she had 2 children, 2 beautiful little girls. However, Judy's life would be far from simple. As a young adult, Judy was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And then her cancer returned again in 2006, and I'm not sure of the exact timeline, but I believe that Judy's marriage failed right around this same time. Her husband was allegedly unfaithful and left her as she underwent surgery for her cancer recurrence. And as she was recovering from surgery, she experienced complications that left her needing prescription pain control. At one point, she told her mother that she was worried she might be getting addicted to the medication, and her mother assured her that as long as she was taking the medication according to the directions, everything should be just fine. But it was not fine. Judy found herself in full-blown opioid addiction, and when her medical insurance lapsed, with her addiction unmanaged and Judy still dealing with pain from her medical issues, Judy didn't have the resources to get the help and support she needed. Instead, she turned to the only avenue she saw available to help manage her pain and addiction: illegally procured prescription opioids and eventually heroin. In the height of her addiction, Judy wasn't able to adequately care for her 2 daughters, so her mother took custody of one of the girls and Judy's sister took the other. And Judy, always a fighter, began her fight to regain control of her life from the addiction that had robbed her of herself and her reason for living, her 2 baby girls. She entered a rehabilitation program, and Judy began the long fight to recover from her addiction to return to her daughters. And Judy was winning. Her mother and sister were so proud of how she was taking back control of her life without illegal drugs. They had their Judy back. The girls had their mother back. And then Judy Malinowski received a message on Facebook. A guy she'd known in high school reached out, and he told her how beautiful she was and how he'd always had feelings for her. That man was Michael Slager. Michael had a long list of failed relationships and a history of legal problems. But Michael told this young mother, a woman that had recently fought her way back from cancer and an opioid addiction, a woman that had suffered the heartbreak of infidelity and a failed marriage, and he told her all of the beautiful things that she needed and wanted to hear in those moments. He told her how beautiful she was. He told her how he felt like she was so amazing. He took her out on one date, and in the words of Judy, he just never left. From that moment forward, they were together always. Michael was love-bombing Judy. Love-bombing is a manipulative tactic where someone overwhelms their partner in the early stages of a relationship with excessive affection. Love-bombing can include excessive compliments, grandiose gestures, extravagant gifts, staying in constant contact, and talk of futures together. And for abusers, it can be an effective way to begin to assert their control over their partners early in a relationship. Judy's mother, Bonnie, was immediately suspicious of Michael Slager and his intentions. She told Judy that she didn't like him and she didn't trust him. Furthermore, she did not want Michael around Judy's daughters. So Michael, a master manipulator, went to see Judy's mom. He asked her not to judge a book by its cover and not to treat him as if he was no good because he looked like a tough guy and had tattoos. He had the audacity to challenge her to look at him as Jesus would, worthy despite past mistakes he'd made in his life. And like Judy, Bonnie fell for it. She felt like this man, if he was willing to come to her and ask for her acceptance, then maybe she was being unfair to him. Maybe he was right, and she was unfairly judging him and his motives with her daughter. So Bonnie made the decision to back off. She believed that a man humbling himself to ask a mother to give him the chance to treat her daughter right must be a decent kind of guy. She could not have been more wrong. Once Michael had Bonnie completely snowed, he was able to more effectively drive a wedge between Judy and her family by controlling the narrative so that both sides trusted him implicitly. Michael knew about Judy's addiction troubles, so he knew that the easiest way to control her would be to drag her back into active addiction. Michael began providing Judy with heroin, but Michael didn't do heroin or any drugs himself. He only provided it to Judy as a method of control. He then talked to Judy's mom to tell her about how Judy was relapsing and how Judy wasn't able to pay the electric bill or the water bill, so that Judy's mom would give money to Michael to help him cover Judy's bills, and Michael would take that money and purchase and supply Judy with heroin so that he could continue to maintain control over her. Once Judy was dependent on Michael because he controlled her supply of drugs, he began physically abusing her. As the physical abuse in their relationship escalated, the police would be summoned repeatedly to the home where Judy lived. However, in those encounters, Judy was seen as the unreliable drug addict, and Michael was treated as the saintly boyfriend trying to turn her life around. And because he was sober and Judy was not, police never made him leave. Michael accused Judy of flying off the handle in a drug-fueled rage and told police that he'd have to defend himself from her. Even when Judy told police that she was in fear for her life, police failed to do anything to protect Judy from her abuser. There were times Judy ran away to hide from him in hotels. However, at multiple points in 2015 during the height of the violence in their relationship, Judy would sometimes take Michael's car to get away from him. Michael would call the police and report that Judy had stolen his vehicle so that he could use public servants to hunt down Judy for him. Once Judy and his car were located, Michael would use the threat of pressing charges against her to lure her back to him, where he would continue to provide her with drugs, her only outlet from the horror show that her life had become. Bonnie realized something was not right when Judy began showing signs of physical abuse. As Bonnie grew wise to Michael's manipulation and realized how afraid Judy was of her boyfriend, she would occasionally exchange heated text messages with Michael. In one, she told him in no uncertain terms to leave Judy alone and stay away from her. Michael responded with a one-word answer: no. The threats and violence escalated until Judy decided that her only hope to escape Michael's grasp was to re-enter rehabilitation and be free of the drugs she was using to self-medicate. She'd done it before, she could do it again, because Judy was a fighter. When Judy found out that a bed had opened up for her in the same rehabilitation program she'd been to prior to her relationship with Michael, Judy was committed to doing whatever it took to get clean. And it was Michael himself that offered to take Judy to the rehab on one horrifically fateful day in 2015. Now, what happened exactly to cause the argument between Judy and Michael isn't completely clear. But the two were arguing when Michael pulled his truck into a Speedway gas station on the way to take Judy to rehab. They exited the truck, where Judy, clearly enraged, throws a cup of soda at Michael. In retaliation, Michael grabbed a full gas can from the bed of his truck and stormed over to Judy, who at this point was sitting on the ground. He poured the gasoline over her head and down her back, completely dousing Judy's hair and all of her clothes with the volatile liquid. And then he walks away from Judy. In fact, he walks away for 33 entire seconds. He goes to his truck. Judy has gasoline fumes burning her eyes and throat and is begging for help when Michael grabs the lighter from his truck, returns to where Judy is on the ground, and he sets her on fire right there in the parking lot of the Speedway gas station. And the entire encounter is caught on the security camera of the bank ATM adjacent to the Speedway station. Bystanders see the horrific sight of Judy, her entire body engulfed in flames, and run to the scene, unsure of how this happened, but with the intent of helping in some way. One of the first bystanders reported to police that when he first approached the scene, he saw Michael just standing there watching Judy burn. And when Michael recognized that people were looking at him and approaching him, that's when he ran to get a fire extinguisher. Bonnie, Judy's mother, had just spoken to Judy perhaps 20 minutes prior to the attack that would change her life and her daughter's life forever. Bonnie was relieved that Judy was going back to rehab. I imagine that she was hopeful that Judy's recovery would help Judy to recognize how toxic her relationship with Michael had become and bring that fighting spirit out in her daughter to leave her abuser for good. Then Bonnie's phone rang. The voice on the phone asked her if she was Judy Malinowski's mother, and when she confirmed that she was, the hospital told her Judy had been burned and that Bonnie needed to get to the hospital as quickly as possible, as they were going to have to sedate and intubate Judy. And it wasn't until Bonnie was in the car on the way to the hospital that those words hit her. Intubate Judy. Meaning they would have a machine breathing for Judy. This wasn't any sort of minor burn. Judy had sustained some sort of life-threatening injury. When Bonnie arrived at the hospital, as a nurse walked her to Judy's room, she passed an open room and saw Michael inside. Bonnie ran into Michael's room before the nurses and police could stop her, asking him what happened to Judy. Michael's response, as police and nurses did their best to bustle Bonnie out of the room, was, "It was an accident. It was an accident." But police knew it was no accident. They had seen the security camera footage from the bank's ATM. Michael had intentionally set Judy on fire, and before he was released from the hospital, they informed him that he was under arrest. But what was Michael's story for police? He told police about the fight and about Judy throwing her drink at him. And he said that in a rage he had grabbed the closest thing he had, the gas can from his truck, and he had said to her, "You want to ruin my clothes? I'll ruin yours." He told police he hadn't intended harm to Judy, he just overreacted to her aggression toward him. As for how the fire started, he told police that after he dumped gasoline on her and walked away, Judy had immediately calmed down, removed her sweatshirt, which he thought meant there wouldn't have been any remaining gasoline on her, despite the fact that he literally dumped it over her head and it was all in her hair and saturating all of her clothes. And then Judy, now calm, had just immediately asked Michael to come and light a cigarette for her, and he just didn't think that doing so would start a fire. That was the absurd lie Michael Slager told police when they questioned him about what happened. They also were able to ask Judy 2 questions before she was intubated. "Judy, did you spill gas on yourself?" And Judy answered weakly, "No." "Judy, did Michael put gas on you?" And Judy answered weakly, "Yes." When Bonnie got to Judy's room, Judy's sister was already there, and Bonnie walked in and didn't even recognize her daughter. The body laying on the bed had been burned beyond the recognition of her own mother. Judy's sister went out into the hallway and vomited. Judy had sustained severe 3rd and 4th degree burns over more than 80% of her body. The nurse that initially cared for Judy in the hospital said that she'd never seen anyone burned as badly as Judy survive more than a few days. In fact, some hospitals use a numerical assessment tool to predict the mortality risk of burn patients. It's based on the age and total body surface area burned. Judy's assessment landed her at a 110% risk of mortality based on the severity of her injuries. But Judy didn't know she was supposed to die of her injuries. And Judy was a fighter. Prosecutors initially charged Michael Slager with malice assault and aggravated arson. When Bonnie heard that Michael was being charged, she hadn't yet seen the video, She didn't know that this was anything other than a horrific accident. She was shocked to learn that police were charging Michael, shocked that the horrific truth laying on a hospital bed was a criminal act. She couldn't believe that someone could be so evil as to inflict this kind of pain on someone intentionally. And learning that there was video evidence that this man had intentionally done this to her daughter was even more shocking. A video of her daughter being intentionally set on fire. Judy's daughters were also not prepared to see the extent of their mother's injuries. They didn't comprehend the severity of their mother's burns, and when they saw her, one of her daughters said that she didn't believe it was actually her mother. She was so severely burned, her daughter couldn't recognize her. Prosecutors admit that they already knew this would end up being a murder case, and they were just waiting for Judy to die. They'd been told by doctors that her injuries would most likely be fatal, and they fully intended to charge Michael Slager with murder. But then they got the call no one expected. Judy had awoken from her medically induced coma. She was awake, and police got a chance to question Judy about what happened. Judy's vocal cords were so badly damaged she could barely speak in a whisper, but police were able to question her. She did not have a cigarette. She had not asked Michael to light one for her. She had been calling for help as her throat and eyes burned from the gasoline. And when he set her on fire, she told police that she believed in that moment she was absolutely going to die. She prayed in those moments, asking God to please forgive her and to please take care of her children. Judy was just as surprised as everyone else when she woke up in the hospital. And when Judy was told that Michael was in jail charged with a horrific attack on her, her first reaction is one we see in so many domestic abuse cases. She was concerned for him. This is a common response of domestic abuse survivors. They tend to blame themselves, feel guilty, feel shame. They've been told so frequently throughout their abuse that the horrors they endure are their fault, and they begin to believe it. They believe that their behavior has led to some sort of pain for their abuser that justifies the violence perpetrated against them. And they experience intense guilt for causing that pain and causing their abuser to lash out. And Judy Malinowski felt guilt that Michael Slager was in jail because of what he did to her. But even in the cloud of confused feelings for Michael's experience, Judy was also afraid. She was afraid of what would happen to her if he got out of jail. As prosecutors began investigating to charge Michael, his defense team began their efforts to put together a defense strategy. Their first order of business was to keep Michael's prior arrest record out of court. You see, Michael Slager had a rap sheet miles long. He'd been charged with rape and pled down to sexual battery, and he was a registered sex offender. And that wasn't likely to make him very endearing to a jury of his peers. And neither was the rest of his rap sheet, which included petty theft, endangering children, disorderly conduct, aggravated menacing, stalking, domestic violence, assault, resisting arrest, sexual assault, failure to notify as a sex offender, breaking and entering, receiving stolen property, writing bad checks, and obstructing official business, and the list goes on. Michael Slager was not a good man, and while everyone deserves the opportunity to leave their past behind them when they begin to walk a new path in life, based on his treatment of Judy Malinowski, a woman that he claimed to love, a woman that he said he wanted to marry, I think it's safe to say that Michael Slager wasn't really in the business of turning over new leaves. He was trotting a well-worn pathway. Michael Slager wasn't a man that just made a mistake here or there. He illustrated a powerful and repeatable pattern of violent behavior, and despite this, he was so manipulative and controlling that he managed to convince everyone from Judy's own mother to police that he could be trusted more than she could because she was an addict. Judy told police during several of those 911 calls for domestic violence that she feared for her life and believed that Michael was going to kill her. And no one listened. No one got her help. No one removed Michael from their home. No one recognized that despite her addiction, Judy absolutely was the victim of abuse, and Judy needed someone in a position of authority to believe her, and they would not. They allowed Judy to continue to be a victim of a man that had illustrated a repeated pattern of violence against women. They failed her, and now they needed to depend on her in order to put Michael behind bars. The people that failed Judy needed her help, and she gave it to them because Judy was a fighter. Prosecutors intended to put Michael behind bars for the maximum sentence allowed by law, which was 11 years. For a brutal attack that should have killed Judy and did permanently disfigure her, 11 years was the maximum sentence allowed by law in Ohio for the charges against him. And the injustices don't stop there. Judy's medical bills were in the millions. Her family didn't have the resources to pay them. But there were options for victims of domestic violence to receive relief from medical bills. There were state-controlled victim relief funds. The problem is that if the injured party had any sort of illegal substances in their system at the time of the injury, they were immediately disqualified. It did not matter that Slager had intentionally gotten Judy back on drugs to control her. It didn't matter that she literally was on her way to be admitted to a rehab. She had illegal substances in her system. She was not eligible for financial assistance through Victims Relief to cover even a penny of her millions of dollars of medical debt. A victim of one of the most horrific attacks one can imagine, and now she was being victimized by the same mentality that prevented police from believing her, prevented them from protecting her, prevented them from helping her. That same attitude was at play now, victimizing her in a completely new manner by denying that she was deserving of financial assistance to pay for her medical bills that she incurred as the result of a crime committed against her. Judy lay in a hospital bed without ears, without fingers, without hair, and the state of Ohio told her that she did not qualify as a victim because of illegal substances in her system. They stripped her of her identity as a victim, and in doing so, they essentially blamed her for her situation when they said she wasn't a victim. Ohio said Judy didn't qualify as a victim. Ohio police said Judy wasn't being abused. Ohio investigators said her status as an addict negated their duty to protect her. Ohio failed Judy Malinowski, and they weren't done failing her yet. Because if Judy survived her attack, the maximum sentence Michael Slager could be given in the state of Ohio was 11 years. He had intentionally set a woman on fire, subjected her to permanent, disfiguring, and debilitating injury, causing her excruciating pain that she had to live with day in and day out. Judy coded 7 times. She endured 59 surgeries. She fought back from infections and complications. And as long as Judy was alive, the maximum sentence Michael Slager could face for his attack against her was 11 years. Now you might be asking, why did they charge him with felonious assault and aggravated arson, but not attempted murder in the first degree? And you're right to ask the question. Prosecutors asked the question. However, the burden of proof for attempted first-degree murder means the state has to prove that Michael Slager was intending to kill Judy Malinowski when he set her on fire. Not just that he could have killed her, but that he intended for that to be the outcome. And they have to prove that intent beyond a reasonable doubt. The burden of proof was just too high. The defense would have pointed out that Michael was on his way to take Judy to rehab, and the fact that Michael was the one that got the fire extinguisher and put the flames out made it nearly impossible to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that his intention was to kill her. And Michael Slager, upon the advice of his attorney, agreed to a no-contest plea, which means he didn't have to admit guilt, but he would accept sentencing determined by a judge for his attack on Judy Malinowski. And when the judge sentenced Michael Slager to the maximum sentence of 11 years, she told the court that she blamed the Ohio legislature for laws that prevented her from imposing a harsher sentence. And Judy Malinowski didn't get to hear Michael Slager plead guilty or take responsibility for the horrific attack against her. Judy Malinowski had to accept that as long as she was alive, Michael Slager stood a chance of walking out of prison a free man one day. And that wasn't good enough for Judy. And that's how Judy's Law was born. Judy's Law sought to enact harsher penalties for perpetrators of domestic violence that intentionally disfigure or maim their victims. Judy's daughter Kaylin, at the tender age of 13, bravely stood in front of the Ohio State Judiciary Committee asking them to please pass Judy's Law. Here are some excerpts from 13-year-old Kaylin's speech. While we stand here today, my mom lies in a hospital bed where she has been for 689 days. She has been in a lot of pain, and every day is a fight to stay alive. The man who hurt her took away a lot from my family. He took away my mom. He took away my grandma's time. And most of all, he took away the most precious and gorgeous person everyone knew. While he got 11 years, my mom, my sister, and I all got a life sentence. I won't have my mom to help me get ready for cheerleading tryouts or to get ready for the first day of school each year, Kaylin testified. She won't be there to do my hair or spot me on my tumbling. She won't see me graduate or see me get married. By this time in 2017, Judy's health was deteriorating. In one documentary on the case called The Fire That Took Her, which is available on Paramount Plus, Judy's daughter asks her grandmother why they don't allow humans to be put to sleep like animals when their deaths are inevitable and the victims are in pain. And Judy's mother has to explain to a child that in order to be able to charge Michael Slager for Judy's murder, she cannot die of a medication overdose. She has to die as the result of complications from her injuries. In June of 2017, Judy's Law passed, but it wasn't retroactive, so it wouldn't change Michael Slager's sentence. Days later, Judy Malinowski died at the age of 33 after almost 700 days of living in constant and severe pain in the hospital due to the burns caused by Michael Slager. Franklin County prosecutors moved to charge Michael Slager with aggravated murder. And even though Judy died before Michael was charged or tried in her murder, Judy got to testify at her own murder trial. In December of 2016, prosecutors successfully convinced a judge to allow Judy to testify via video and to be cross-examined by Michael's defense team in anticipation of her inevitable passing and the subsequent murder charges that they intended to file against Michael Slager. However, in order to testify and to be cross-examined by the defense, Judy had to be of sound mind. This is a woman that was on daily massive doses of extremely strong pain medication to deal with the agony that she lived with every second of her life since the attack. Judy would have to drastically reduce her pain management in order to be found by a judge to be competent to testify. She would have to live for weeks with increased pain that was brutal even with the highest doses of pain management that she could take. But Judy agreed. She agreed to more of her own suffering so that she could have her day in court, so that she could testify against Michael Slager, so that she could tell a jury and show the jury what he had done to her. Because if there's one thing Judy was known to be, it was a fighter. Because Judy Malinowski testified before Michael was charged, her testimony was confidential, sealed by the court only to be unsealed for an eventual trial. Judy's family did not get to hear it. Judy's mother stood outside her daughter's hospital room for 3 hours, waiting for Judy to finish testifying. And then she would wait more than 6 months for Judy's testimony to be unsealed after her death, for her words to echo from the grave to put her attacker behind bars forever. Now, Ohio is the death penalty state, and the crime Michael Slager committed was definitely worthy of his sentence of death. However, before her passing, Judy told her family that she wanted Michael to receive life without parole, and she wanted the courts to spare his life. Judy didn't believe in the death penalty, and even though she lived every day in excruciating pain, she didn't want Slager to be put to death. Judy's daughter took a different view. She didn't think it was fair that Michael Slager would still have access to his child when she would never have access to her mother again. The prosecution prepared to go to court, and the defense objected to the admission of Judy's testimony on the grounds that Judy didn't testify in the courtroom, and the defendant is assured his right by law to confront his accuser. However, the judge pointed out that the defense had had ample time and opportunity to cross-examine Judy. In fact, 2/3 of Judy's testimony had been in cross-examination. A cross-examination that was truthfully a disaster for the defense. Even Michael's defense attorneys admit it was a disaster. Now, Michael was upset because he had told his defense attorney that he wanted to be in the room with Judy when she testified. He told attorneys that she would tell the truth if he was there in the room with her. Michael wanted to continue to exert his control over Judy. He believed that being there in the room would be an intimidation for Judy and work in his favor. Luckily, the judge saw through Michael's attempt to intimidate Judy and ruled that he could not be in the room with Judy while she testified. He would be in the courtroom with both the prosecution and defense attorneys, but no one would be permitted to be in the room with Judy. Once the camera was set up and Judy was sworn in, Judy would endure testifying and being cross-examined while she was alone, without the support of her family, her friends, or even the prosecutors in the same room with her. She would testify while she was in excruciating pain because of her reduced pain management. But Judy's voice was clear and strong, and she told the court what Michael had done to her. The defense headed into Michael's trial with the understanding that a jury seeing Judy's testimony would likely seal their client's fate. Judy came across as clear-headed and confident, and the evidence of what Michael had done to her was literally all over her body and face. Her missing ears, her missing fingers, the horrific scars on a face that had once won beauty pageants, and the missing hair on the head that had once worn a homecoming crown. But Michael still refused to plead guilty. He refused to say that he intentionally hurt Judy. So Michael's defense team brought in Michael's daughter to plead with him to please plead guilty in order to take the death penalty off the table. And Michael agreed to negotiate. Judy's family desperately wanted Michael to plead guilty and to take responsibility for the horrific act he perpetrated against Judy. They also wanted to see and hear Judy's testimony that had been sealed. The defense and prosecution finally got the family's approval to proceed with a plea deal when Michael folded and agreed to plead guilty to aggravated murder, and Judy's testimony would be unsealed and shown in court when the judge sentenced Michael. He received life without the possibility of parole in accordance with Judy's wishes. Judy's family got their justice. They heard Michael claim his guilt in court, and they heard their precious fighter, Judy, tell her truth to the judge. Michael Slager will spend the rest of his natural life in prison. Judy Malinowski was a fighter. Judy fought cancer twice. Judy fought addiction. Judy was fighting to free herself from addiction again and to take control away from her abuser. And Judy fought to live. She fought for over 2 years to live long enough to testify. She fought to support the passage of Judy's Law, which increases the maximum sentence for abusers that permanently disfigure their victims. And Judy even fought to spare her murderer's life. Judy was the first woman in the United States to testify in her own murder trial. Judy fought through excruciating pain to testify, and when Judy finally lost her fight, succumbing to complications of her extensive injuries, her fight continued, and it still continues to this day. Judy's law passed in Ohio, but Judy's Foundation is still fighting to have it passed as a federal law. They've been fighting since 2017. As of the time of this recording in December of 2024, it still has not passed federally. Judy's Foundation continues Judy's fight to help women that are victims of substance abuse, domestic violence, and human trafficking. Now, I can't speak for Judy, but I would guess that if she were here to speak for herself today, she'd tell us that we have to do better. The demons and personal struggles victims of domestic violence face don't make them any less of a victim. They need to be believed. They need to be protected. They need to be supported. If someone had listened to Judy, if they had worked harder to protect her from Michael Slager, if they'd helped her escape her abuser, Judy Malinowski might still be here today. I know one thing. If she could see how her daughters and mother have fought in her name to pass Judy's law federally, and how they've stepped up to help other victims, she would be proud, so proud, to see that even though Judy Malinowski left this world, her fight continues. Because Judy Malinowski was a fighter. Crime to Burn is a production of Crime to Burn, LLC, where we light fires in your brain and not your buildings. All rights reserved. Still spiritually parched after this episode? It's okay, Steve believes in cross-pollination. Here's a trailer for a show we think deserves to infiltrate your ear holes, in a good way. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review before you go. Steve is watching.
I'm Mandy.
And I'm Avery.
We're the hosts and creators of Thick Thighs and Creepy Vibes.
Join us as we take a deep dive into the macabre and the unexplained.
Listen every Wednesday as we take you on a chilling journey that transports you to all corners of the Great White North.
Let's boot those Sunday scaries while we take a rip into the harrowing tales of the haunted and the supernatural phenomena that defy explanation.
So grab your ketchup chips
and your Caesars and make sure to
creep it real.